So thanks for the introduction. So basically, the question is kind of nomen est omen. Does your domain name influence your digital performance or predict it or has any influence at all? So Michelle kindly told a little bit about where I'm coming from, so I can quickly jump over the next slides. I guess it will be in all your interest because the lunch break is right afterwards. So if I finish early, we'll be the first on the buffet, which is always a good thing, right? So why I'm here, why I can tell you a little bit about this. You mentioned Searchmetrics, founded in Berlin, actually kind of 10 years ago, close to. Being typical German engineers company, very data-driven, looking to collect data and help our customers to better understand what's going on in the digital world. Currently over 180 people, known from the start as a thought leader innovator for search engine optimization software or platform. Currently working globally, offices around the world, some are to New York, Barcelona, London, Paris, and again headquartered Berlin. Our core product, Searchmetrics Suite, focusing on helping, again, enterprise clients and agencies working for large enterprises to better understand the digital world and their footprint in the digital world. Basically, the foundation of success is the infrastructure behind it, or more precisely, data we collect. So we collect tons of data for years. Recently, we had our founder and CTO, Marcus, had a meeting with other founders and CTOs in Berlin. All the young dynamic nerds came together and talked about database sizes, and we had the biggest database. So we have something around 25 petabyte. I don't know what that means, but it's quite a lot, I guess, which means really, really big data. I'm glad that we don't store any personalized data. We are out of that. However, I also heard from someone else once, data is dumb, which is true, because only the change of data reveals information. So that's why we actually collect the data constantly to gain insights and analyze the data and better understand changes which happen in the world. Why do we collect all this data? Because we try to understand what Google does. Who did a Google search like in the last 2 days? Hands up. Oh, it's close to 100%. Not very surprisingly, it was an easy question, wasn't it? Google is the gatekeeper to the internet today. So we all use Google every day, and if you're not on Google, you're not existing in the internet, are you? It's so prominent today that it even made its way into the German dictionary called Duden. This is like the institution, like the Oxford Dictionary of German language. It's an official German word to Google something. Strange, isn't it? It's more than it. It's not only part of daily life. It has a massive impact on businesses today. And I apologize for this next slide. This is a very German slide. But I think it's important to understand. So looking at the economics, there are probably 24 trillion US dollars in retail sales worldwide. 24 trillion, a lot of money. 44% of that is either directly or indirectly triggered by online. Indirectly means even if you buy your car on your local dealer, you most likely have researched, analyzed, and configured the car online before. So in case your local car dealer or the car brand wasn't available online or didn't have a very good enough website experience, you probably end up going to the other store and buying this other car. So as I said, on the other hand side, there's the demand. So people doing searches like you and me, we all do searches, 2.2 trillion searches per year, 6 billion per day. 90% of them are informational or transactional. So you have any particular question you want to solve or an information need you want to get answered. And you use your Google for that, right? So Google has a market share in the Netherlands. I looked it up. According to some official stats, around 93%. In Germany, even 96%. So literally, there is no other search engine. So the challenge for everyone in the business, being small or big, like a CMO or the small shop owner, he needs to be in Google for his relevant audience, for his relevant topics. Not being on Google is not an option. So again, sorry for all the number. Please remember this is just one thing. 44% of all worldwide retail sales are triggered online. But times are changing, right? Google is changing all the time. So staying on top of Google is very important, but it's changing. Let's have a look at an example. So that's Home24, the Dutch website. Why did I choose this one? Well, honestly, I didn't choose it. It was my colleague Paul, who's actually Dutch. He actually used to work for Home24. But there's another reason to use that example. According to a census strategy, the Netherlands are the most digital country in the world. I don't know how they do it, but I found it very interesting. But Home24 is, Home24 is a typical online retailer or e-tailer. So what you see here is the visibility chart. The visibility is our main matrix, which can be translated like how likely is it that somebody stumbles across your website when doing a search. So how present is a company or a website in Google, and how likely is it that people find this website? Right? That's the one single KPI, how visible it is. And you can see here that they performed pretty well, and then they dropped. And you see this little G, it's a Google update. So Google changed something, and it impacted them massively. And Home24, it's not only in the Netherlands, it's in the UK, it's a .com site, it's in Poland, it's in UK, and it's also in Germany. And you see the same, they had a rocket start, then they grow steadily, and Google changed something, and they dropped. In nerd speak, it means they lost visibility. It translates into they lost traffic. In real life, it means they lost money, and people are probably losing jobs because the business is going down. And big empires failed because they didn't adapt, right? And why they didn't adapt? Well, they had skeletons in the closet, right? And these skeletons come in different ways. Let's take another example. eHow. That's my most favorite site. No, just kidding. eHow is like this big, huge website in the US from a company called Demand Media. They published a lot of thin content about all possible and impossible questions. So I looked once up, and I don't wear a tie very often. So even today, I'm out of all that. And I needed to for some occasion too, and I was like double checking whether I still can do this wince or not thingy. So I Googled like how to knot a wince or not, and came to an eHow site which explained me with 300 SEO optimized words that there are several ways to knot and tie. The windsor knot, the double windsor, and some others. But they didn't tell me how to do it. So they didn't help me, but that was their business model, to collect a lot of traffic from Google for all possible questions, but didn't deliver the answer, but place Google AdSense on that. So a normal user would have clicked just one of the ads, which probably helped me then, but also generate their business revenue. So very thin content, not very helpful. So they had about 1,590 pages around the topic of get pregnant. Well, literally that's 1,588 more versions than I'm aware of. Probably that guys know some more, but even then he has probably a hard time to get 1,590 different versions. So what does it mean? The SEO visibility of that company, because they had all this crap content, dropped massively when Google adapted and changed. And this is the stock price of the mother or parent company called Demand Media. So they are New York stock listed, and you see the other chart. So being a son of a mathematician, actually a statistician, I know that correlation not always means causation, right? So sometimes some things look alike, but they're not connected. There are some nice examples. US spendings on science, space, and technology absolutely correlates with the number of people who did suicide. Or my most favorite correlation, number of people who drowned by falling into a pool, and movies Nicolas Cage appeared in. 66.6% correlation is still pretty significant from a statistical point of view. Well, there are different opinions about Nicolas Cage being an actor or not, but I can hardly imagine that somebody saw a movie and jumped in the pool to drown. So just, we need to be careful about correlation and causation, and there are big stories around that. But in this particular case, remember the visibility and the stock value, that then was a correlation and a causation, because their whole business model was relying on getting cheap traffic from Google organic search and sell that to Google AdSense. And when Google decided to change their rules because their content was thin, they lost their traffic and they lost their revenue, and people lost their jobs. Sorry? This one here?
How do you
Or
then
this?
explain that dip in visibility, but the increase of the stock value in the curve?
This
there,
one?
There, yeah. They're going up,
Well,
or is that speculation on the stock?
it's probably speculation. I mean, this is obviously, we have been quoted by some of the, there was another big case, Expedia. So one of our customers, not even ourselves, one of our customers using our data wrote an article about Expedia getting hit by Google update. Actually, it was a penalty, as it turns out later. So he showed that visibility dropped. That was published. Some journalists picked it up. And within one day, there was a lot of dynamic. And our founder, Marcus Tober, ended up being on a live interview on Skype on Bloomberg TV about the impact of that drop to Expedia. So actually, within 24 hours or 48 hours, Expedia had to issue an official filing with the SEC, so the New York Stock Exchange regulation, about a possible revenue warning. And I guess something like this happened here, but they can always explain they are not hit. So speculation goes up. Then the next quarter comes out and proves that they didn't get up, right? And then you see this one coming. So what happened to the stock price? They lost $2 billion on market capitalization. $2 billion. That. What a situation I want to be in. So again, times are changing. So big companies, small companies need to be aware how that impacts their business. And there are others as well. It's not like just this one example, even the big ones. So let's take iTunes, so Apple iTunes. They made a massive mistake here, got a massive hit, learned. Well, we thought they learned, so they came up. But bam, they did it again. So just 9 months later, another one. Doesn't look so dramatic, but if you look at the numbers, it's from probably 4 million to 3 million, which is still 25–30% drop, which they accrued for a couple of weeks till they regained it. Why did they drop? They didn't play along the rules. They didn't deliver what the user expected. Users were unhappy. If users are unhappy, Google penalize. But users are not only unhappy. They, today, times are changing. They are moving further. They get vindictive. They write bad things about you. They write about you on Facebook, on Twitter. So you better be careful what you do to your customers. Because, again, times are changing. It's not the PR department which distinguishes your brand, the internet or the user, your potential customers, which very much have an impact on that. So that's the second German slide here. There's a lot of information on it. So look back at Google. Originally, Google was a string algorithm. A string comparison, simple algorithm comparing strings and trying to match that. Today, it's a pretty massive machine learning system getting much better in understanding what people actually want to use. So in 2000, you could be very successful with the methods of eHow. Optimize spam, what we call it. You just put enough keywords in there. Today, you need to understand what the user wants and need to analyze and understand data. So you need to create high quality content because in the end of the day, still remember the babies, you want to have the happy user. So if you don't create high quality content, user won't be happy. So string comparison. When I looked up the picture for string, obviously a lot of people just have different intentions than I did. So the first pictures came up were not safe for work, but then I found this one. So string comparison was literally an expression from computer linguistics that actually a sequence of letters. So more commonly known as keyword. So the keyword was the beginning of Google matching, or looking for the word which is most prominent on your website, on prominent places, like in the domain, in the URL. So that identified what was your website about. And then it looked up, if somebody typed in this particular word, it showed up the website which has this word on the page, right? Simple comparison of a particular sequence of letters. It was the good old days. But Google became smarter and changed. And with every change, the keyword became less and less and less important. So first they hit keyword landing pages. This was the eHow example. Remember the 1,590 pages about getting pregnant? So it was like really exact match keyword, and this doesn't work anymore. So Panda hit this so-called thin content websites. second update in the Google Zoo was the Penguin. Penguin hit all the backlinks. So if somebody linked to your website with exactly this particular keyword, which was very important in the early days, not working at all today anymore, because it's not natural. The next one was the keyword domains, so that you had like something like insurance.com. Then another animal from the Google Zoo, the hummingbird, probably most underestimated change. With this search, Google implemented a way to better understand or better adapt to user intentions. So again, keywords are not as important anymore. And last step was then finally that they actually took away from us, the marketers, or me as marketer, the chance to optimize for keywords, because they didn't tell me anymore which particular key phrase somebody used in Google, which led him to my site ultimately. So you have to have a referrer. You could check, okay, this guy typed in whatever to come to my website. I don't have this information anymore. So I can't even optimize on keywords anymore. Since we talk about domains, and that was, yeah?
Yeah, so why didn't they provide it anymore? The exact words that were typed in?
Yeah, so originally you could use your web analytics system to look in your own web analytics. You could check, I got like 10 visitors from Google, and they in the refer string was like refer was Google, and in the parameter of the URL was like the query string. So you could analyze that guy came from Google for the search of domain registration, for instance, or a cheap domain or whatever. And this information is lost. Google doesn't provide it anymore. It's called the secure search, so they switched to HTTPS, so they don't provide this referrer anymore. So since you are talking about domains, and I have talked a lot of stuff which you find probably not really relevant, but it was because it all comes back to the keyword thingy here. With this exact match domain, they de-evaluated the importance of having a keyword in your domain. So it doesn't hurt to have the keyword in the domain, but it doesn't help anymore. It's not as important. Same as it's not as important to have it in a title or in a header or somewhere else. Why do we know this? Because we do this German ranking factor study every year for 5 years in a row. We do it for the US, for Germany. Every once in a while we do it for other markets as well. We analyze latest one with 3,600 ranking factor correlations. 3,600, German engineering, right? If you want to read it and you're interested in it, you can download it. I took just one thing, the two things, keyword in URL and keyword in domain name. And you see the light green here, that's 212, so there was some correlation. But in the last 4 years, it massively went back. Actually, there's no correlation anymore. So again, correlation, causation, think about Nicolas Cage and people in the pool, right? But you should expect that if there's a correlation, there's not always a causation. But if you don't have even a correlation, there can't be a causation, right? So we believe the keyword is dead, killed by machine learning. Of course, we all type in still searches in the search phrase, right? So we type something in, or we talk to Siri, or we talk to whatever the Google lady is called. But Google gets better and better at understanding what the intention behind the query is. So all these 1,590 variations of the question of how to get pregnant were basically 1,590 variations of how to get pregnant. So instead of delivering 1,590 different versions, Google understands I better present the one particular website which answers this question holistically, relevant, and understands what it talks about. And it's probably most likely that it will present something like in the US WebMD, which is like the known and trusted source for medical information on the web. Or Wikipedia, for the sake being. Because in the end of the day, all these people want to know the same thing, even if they use different ways to express their interest or their question. So as a result, most of the internet goes dark. Only 11% of the domains still are visible in Google. Means they are presented in the search results in a way that people actually can find it. Other way around, 89% are pretty invisible. These are the numbers for the US, but they pretty much look the same for Germany. it's exactly, it's also 11%. If you look at the details, it's 10.9 and 11.3, but I guess for the sake of simplicity, let's say 11%. What does that mean again? It's becoming much harder to stay on top of the pack and be the one guy in this light green, lime green t-shirt and be on top and be visible in Google. How to do this? Well, this would ruin our lunch break. It's a lot more things to explain, to tell. But to cut it short and have like this one thing to take away, better be good. If you want to be found by Google, make sure that you actually help the user to find answers to the questions. Provide relevant, unique content which people find useful, and don't try to trick Google. Okay, but let's get back to the topic. The original idea when Michel asked me to speak here was, can you make this analysis for the Dutch market, which you did for the German market? So we discussed a little bit what could be interesting. So one thing obviously was to understand how the market share looks from the top-level domains in the Dutch market from a registration point of view compared to a Google point of view. And if there are any particular, again, what are the insights we probably can derive from that. So back to the Netherlands, we looked at the market share of top-level domains in the Dutch Google index. So what we did is we took our Research Cloud data, so we analyzed several million keywords in the Google Netherlands. We came across approximately 40 million domains. They were spread around 200 different top-level domains. Obviously, not very surprisingly, the biggest chunk is .nl, followed by .com. The .eu is already pretty small with only 0.7%, and then the others .org, .net, and like all the rest. .org, just one remark to this, probably pretty strong also from Wikipedia, which is in Holland, in the Netherlands with nl.wikipedia.org, pretty strong. And we took, for Michel, the market share from the registration point of view. You see here there's, not very surprisingly, also very strong the .nl and the .com. And then we basically put it together next to each other. And the one thing which seems to be obvious is that it looks on the first glance like the .nl domain performs less or has a less or smaller market share in the Google index than it has in the registration, while mostly it goes probably for the .com domains. So it could, on a very early first edition, one could think, hi, .com helps me to rank better in the Google index. But before we draw this conclusion, we probably should take a step back and think about other points which does influence this one. And the one thing which obviously comes into my mind is if you are a small business owner or a private person, you're more likely to buy a .nl domain before you buy a .com domain. However, many of these rather small websites, which have a lot, people by and large, they are not connected. Or if they are connected, you see this lovely GIF image, maybe a version with a flashlight, which says website is still under construction. Even if they have a website live, it's probably very niche and it's not ranking very well for a lot of commonly searched terms. So it's a question of who buys the domains. On the opposite side, so if you can agree that probably a certain amount of .nl domains is bought by private persons or small business owners which do not necessarily build a massive website on that, that obviously has an impact on the probability to rank well in Google. The other part is obviously there are big international brands which host on a .com domain. And obviously these big brands do rank very well and probably do rank well for a lot of keywords because they have a lot of products. So I checked Garmin.com, one of my favorites. The other one actually, Bozy.com, does have an .nl domain in the Netherlands. Pretty interesting. So Garmin is obviously hosting on a .com domain. I double-checked, it's not registered with SIDN, not very surprisingly. So this is a domain, .com domain, which ranks very well in the Google index, but wasn't in your statistics, most likely. But there are also like some major Dutch brands which have the same issue or situation. So I checked Heineken's also registered somewhere in America, I guess probably 10, 15 years ago, when it oh, what's broken there? Anyway, so that's bol.com, and Bol is, as you can see, in the Dutch market, according to our database, ranking number 13. That means they are very, very visible in the search index because they obviously have trillions of products, like Amazon in the US or Germany. You can buy anything there, so they rank for many, many keywords, and so it's very likely that you come across that domain if you do a search. Yes, and they paid most
And they
money.
pay the most money.
Yes, but we are looking at the organic results, and we as Searchmetrics are very keen on distinguishing between organic and paid results. I know, and that's another big story, holistic search. Thanks for mentioning. My mom doesn't know the difference between paid and organic. For her, it's just Google. My wife knows because I told her. Guess what? She said, I don't care. Google makes sure that the results are relevant. So that's another big thing we always discuss. If you're a marketer, you should make search marketing holistically and not have this nerd doing SEO and this greedy guy with a big pocket spending money on Google AdWords. But that's, again, totally different story. So, but just to explain why there might be quite some difference in the market share from a registration point of view and from the Google index market share. So, summarize it, we couldn't identify a particular pro or con against the one or domain or the other from a technical point of view. However, and I'll come to back that a bit later again, you should always think about the user signals. So Google today is also a massive A/B testing machine. So Google, remember this 6 billion searches per day. So Google, we perform searches, Google presents us top 10 results. Actually, nobody looks at the second page. Anybody ever looked on the second, third page result? The nerds, yeah. Always joke, the best place to hide a dead body, third page on Google. So usually people stay on the first site. If they don't find something on the first site, they rather change the search query than looking for the second page. Yeah, so now I lost my story. Right, my mom. My mom looks on the first page, but she's trained to look for .de domains. Because if she sees a .com domain, she expects that site might be English, and she doesn't speak English. So you have to keep in mind the user thing. So Google presents top 10 results, measures how many people click on the first, or they know how many people clicked which link. And if this person, even if it's anonymous, they doesn't know the name, comes back in within a second and clicks another result, Google knows the first result presented or first result clicked did not obviously deliver what the user expected. And this is something Google can easily track, and they change it. So if they feel like these website they rank third or fourth gets more clicks or has a lower bounce rate, then people find this page probably more helpful, and it is likely to come up. So even it's not an algorithmical thing, it might be having an impact from the user signal. So keep in mind your mom or brother or whoever who probably might prefer a .to an L domain compared to a .com or .info domain. All right, but let's zoom in a little bit. So we had to look at the big ones, .com, .nl, and .eu. What we also had, thanks to Michael, a hint about some more exotic views in our specifics of the Dutch market. So we had a closer look at the rest or other. And we zoomed in and looked for these two which were mentioned, the .new and .tk, as well as for the new TDLs or geographic TDLs, Amsterdam. So, we looked at the numbers and we found them very small. So small that we find it hard to make any analysis out of that because the data set is just close to random. And it's not surprisingly, we had the same in Germany. Michael mentioned that from the DENIC. You see here the list of the analysts in Germany. Obviously, the German index is actually even a bit better or bigger, not better, bigger, sorry. Let me zoom in for you. So we looked at the new top-level domains and we highlighted those which are German. So travel is international, jobs, international it's not German. So we looked, the only one which has some importance in Germany is the .Berlin domain, followed by .Cologne, .Bavaria, and the first non-geographic top-level domain in Germany is Kaufen, shopping, with a whopping, 0.0002%, literally invisible. And if you look at the average ranking positions, it's somewhere between, actually third page. So nobody see that. However, we try to, what could be an analysis, oh, sorry.
Yeah, just a question. Talking about Berlin, does a restaurant in Berlin, when I'm, because this is country-wise, but when I'm searching in Berlin, so my IP address is in Berlin or whatever, and looking for a restaurant, does a restaurant.berlin rank better than a restaurant.de?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you very much. That was the analysis we did.
I knew you were going to do this.
Thank you. It's always good to bribe somebody in the audience, right? So actually what we did was exactly this question. So does a local domain help you if you do a local search from a local IP? And local IP sounds like something very technical, but most people today, if they're looking for a restaurant, well, they use this, right? And mobile search has overtaken desktop search, well, in the last, depending on the country, like last 6 to 12 months probably. So people are using more and more their mobile phone for searches. And with the mobile phone, even now we all are now, since the last presentation, much more aware of our data privacy rights. Standard default setting is everybody knows where, or the mobile phone knows where you are, and they can even provide you the restaurant around the corner. So what we tried to analyze was how does a website rank with a .berlin domain compared to a .de or .com in a local search performed from Berlin. And actually, yes, they rank better. And they rank better by 1.18% in average. German accuracy, right? We take a big data and we give you 2-digit numbers. Let's say they rank roughly one number better. All right, is that enough to change my domain to .berlin.de? Should I now go to my domain register and buy a hell of a lot of not domains? I know you would like to have the answer yes, but trying to give it, looking at the data, where we found out that the recommendation can only be if you have a domain which is performing pretty good. So the Visit Berlin, for instance, you see here, visibility going up constantly over the last years. No, don't touch it. Why should you? Especially in this particular case, Visit Berlin does have a local connection to Berlin, but probably you use the site being in Utrecht or in Amsterdam to research your next trip to Berlin, because it's about visiting Berlin, not being in Berlin, right? So especially in this case, you probably want to stay with a .de domain. If you have a domain which is doing like so-so, not developing very strong, going up and down, basically close to zero somewhere here, and you think about relaunching the site anyway because you feel like it's not performing very well, and you do have a regional context, you do have a local context, yes, then you can switch. If you have a new domain and start from scratch, it's basically the same. If you have a local context and you do something in Berlin, or you want to start your restaurant in Berlin or your haircut or whatever, that might be a good idea to choose then .berlin domain, mostly for the reason that, of course, you probably have more names available, because the good ones are for .de are probably gone already. As well, you can probably come up with a nice domain which people can actually remember, even if they don't remember it correctly. If they type it in close enough in Google, Google hopefully will direct you to your particular website. That is actually a nice example. I hate to present it because in English it's .berlin, which is very hard to speak, but that is actually a nice example because these guys made a domain move. Actually, they do two domain moves, one intended, one unintended. So let me tell you a little bit what happened. So the original website of that particular company, domain registrar in Berlin, had .berlin.de. Now it becomes a tricky part. Since they are the domain register for the .berlin TDLL, they already automatically get assigned the domain nic.berlin. They just mirrored their site. They didn't do anything from SEO marketing perspective. They just mirrored the site on both domains. And out of a sudden, without them doing anything, in this particular week, Google delisted all their rankings with .berlin.de and replaced it with the identical landing pages with, from their mirrored site, nick.berlin. So they didn't lose their visibility. They just switched to the clone website, right? Obviously, that wasn't the domain they wanted to be found for. So they had, okay, if that happens, let's take some action and make it proactively, and go to the site they actually wanted to be ranked for, the new .berlin website. And in this part, they actually did an intended move. So they launched the new website. They made all the redirect, technical stuff, redirect, canonicals, whatever, to make sure that Google understands, please use now this new domain and rank us for the new domain. And what you can see here is that actually it took them only about 2-3 weeks to regain their visibility from the orange line to the blue line. Which is pretty impressive, since a normal domain move usually takes about 3 months.
I don't know your next slide, but a question about where it's being hosted. Is it relevant for Google? Does a DE domain name rank better when it's hosted in Germany than in Holland?
Yes, it is. It is. We actually moved.
And can you explain why? How? We don't know the algorithm, but can you tell something more about it?
I guess it's basically probability. So if you are, they expect simply that you should be in the country you're ranking for. Why, I don't know, but we have a lot of experience in the past. I worked with another company before. We tried to host a Polish website in Germany, didn't work out. Actually, Searchmetrics, we moved our own searchmetrics.com website from our standard German hoster to the US hosting, because we hadn't a chance to rank well in the US index until we changed the hosting to a US IP address, which seems to be pretty strange. But for some reason, it seems to be actually a ranking factor that the website is actually physically hosted in the country you want to be relevant for.
So for a Dutch company, it's not good to be a GoDaddy America customer?
No, that's why GoDaddy actually moved a lot of hosting centers into Europe.
Okay.
.com as well? Oh, wait for the microphone, please. Otherwise, the recording won't work.
Okay. It's the same for the .com. So a Dutch company which also has a .com extra or just a .com, it's not good to host it in Holland?
As I said, searchmetrics.com was our company website. We moved it from Germany to US because we didn't have a chance to rank well in the US index. We ranked well in Germany, but we didn't rank in the US. And since the US was for us an important market, we actually it's 10 times bigger than German market, we switched over to US.
For a Dutch company who wants to operate in Holland, is not interested in America? Or
I would suggest to keep the hosting in Holland then.
In Holland.
Better safe than sorry, right? I mean, as I said, you remember Bob Dylan, times are changing, you never know what Google does next, but at the moment, still as of today, real life examples have shown that it has an impact where you actually are hosted. I personally find it stupid, but it seems to be the reality. One particular issue which might take one important thing is Google is looking very much into speedy sites. So site speed is very, very important ranking factor, that your site is loading fast. So one thing is obviously the design you do, but the other one is obviously if you host abroad, you have latencies, right? So this might also be like an indirect issue. However, the latency between Poland and Germany wasn't high, and still it wasn't possible to rank well in Poland with a .pl domain physically hosted in Stralsund, which is literally 200 kilometers from Poland. All right, so again, what this seems to indicate is that you move to a new TDLL. It seems that Google kind of is more adaptive to change to a new TDLL than if you would just make a normal domain switch from a classic TDLL. All right, so looking at this, is SEO, does the name of your domain predict, influence your success in digital marketing? No. At least not from a technical, algorithmical point of view. So it's not very strong indicator. Remember, exact match domain you got is not so having the keyword is less important. It's not important to have it in a domain. It's not helping you much to have it in a domain. So you shouldn't go for some to have that keyword in the domain with some exotic TLD at the end. It doesn't necessarily help you. It might help you if you are a local business in a local region and you take a local TDLL, it might help you. But if you have a running website which has a history and build trust, don't change it. If you start new or you have not a very successful website and it's kind of restarting, then it's fine. Because it might help Google to categorize your website faster. It might be helpful from the user signals, but then again, I guess personally it will take a couple of months, maybe years, till my mom accept that .berlin is actually a true website, not a spam or fraud website. So keep in mind, we all as a human race need time to adapt to new things, and we are trained for .nl, .de, .com. Okay, so looking at the time, we're good in time. So the one thing, if you want to rank well, better be good. Make sure that the content of your website is important. Don't try to play around with keywords, domain names, or leave alone buying backlinks. Just really go back to the basics. Google gets better and better in understanding whether your content is valuable or not. If it helps people, if it's relevant to people, then you will rank well. Anything else, anything about the black box, anything about tricking Google, you have seen it. Any skeleton in the wardrobe, we better get rid of it because Google changes and it might cause you not only the visibility or traffic, it might cause jobs. All right. Time's changing all the time. That's why Searchmetrics will live forever. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have some time for questions.
Yes, I have a question for a lot of customers ask me to have extra domain names around their original domain name. Is that necessary, or is it not necessary to catch all the other the misspells?
The question is always, it's like a more fear question. If I don't buy it, who buys it then?
Exactly.
And in the good old times, people, when the keyword was important, people who misspelled the website were landing on the misspelled website, and they could, derive traffic from you. You needed to avoid this. Today, you know that what happens. If you type, people using Google as a spell checker, right? If I don't know what right, I type it into Google and the Google says, did you mean this? Oh yeah, that's the way it is written, right? So Google, again, better understands what you actually want. And being a domain risk, I would say better safe than sorry, but being a customer, I would say you don't have to buy that anymore. It's not important anymore.
Yeah, I have a question. You say that the local new domains are performing better, like .berlin or .amsterdam probably. Did you also research other TLDs? Because I can imagine for Google that it can be interesting to categorize by domain also, because most new TLDs are categories. Is there also? Did you also see a difference in performance for these kind of TLDs, or is it just focused on local TLDs like .amsterdam?
So basically, we didn't had enough data to find any particular trend on this. The domains are so small and used by so small companies, so the whole sample size is too low to see any particular reliable statistical trend as of now. Along the line, we had the discussion, well, recently we hosted our top-tier event from our Searchmetrics Academy, Black Belt in London, where we gathered the smartest people from London agencies and London enterprises, and they discussed about the probably the other TLDs, like the .bmw domain. So, you know, the big international groups buying or creating and buying their own TLDs. And there was a hot discussion whether or not this would be relevant. And most agreed, in the end of the day, they saved their domain, but will never use it because it makes things much more complicated. Imagine you have like in Germany.Garmin. What's the difference between Garmin.de or Garmin.com? And so it goes along these lines. I personally don't see a quick adaptation of these things. And people who buy now domains, if they start buying these local domains or category domains, it will take a long time till they, you know, move up, and we have enough data to see if it's really helped them. And again, if you think about how Google works today and understand the meaning and the content, the categorization on the domain level, I don't think it will be so massive. It won't hurt, but probably not worse to use it.
One last question, Berend.
What about duplicate content? And what is being considered duplicate content and is negative? And then also compared, for example, to have a Dutch page on the .nl and a English page on the .com. When does Google consider it duplicate content? When it's the same content in a different language? And how does it work? When is it negative for your search results?
Yeah, that's pretty simple. Different languages never duplicate content because obviously it's a complete different target group. You know, my mom couldn't read English, so marking a German translation as duplicate would simply not be a user intention, helping the user intention. Duplicate content is really when the content is similar to a large extent. So really 80, 70, 80% copy and paste. So that's duplicate content, and duplicate content is always bad. It always Google will always decide for one particular page to rank because it says otherwise everything else who copies this is just spam. So the biggest challenge you have, you write original content, you're a very good blogger, you know your arts, you write on your blog, and some big newspaper copies it, literally copies it, and since you know newspaper has more authority as a newspaper, all of a sudden they will rank with your content. So this is something you probably want to check on a legal side. But if you most problems of duplicate content comes from big company websites which are simply having different ways to different landing pages, and there's also a big challenge. It can be handled easily technically, so there are technical ways to make it. It's the technical term canonical, so we can tell, hey, this is just a copy of this. Don't look at this. Look at this site and make sure that this site is ranking. But duplicate content, if you copy from someone else, bad idea, forget about it. If you copy yourself, you better make sure that you guide Google to which one is the right page for them to list.